Government's Exhibit 101, you identified as Lil Keith. Was Lil Keith a member of a gang?
Yes, sir.
What gang?
Four Corner Hustlers.
Who, if you know, did Lil Keith associate with or report to?
LaBar Span.
And lastly, Government's Exhibit 130, you identified as Tito. Was Tito a member of a gang?
Yes, sir.
What gang?
Four Corner Hustlers.
How do you know this?
He grew up in the same area as LaBar Span.
And who did Tito associate with or report to?
LaBar Span.
I just asked you about those individuals, Scarface, Lil Boss, Keith, Tito. Did you know them as Four Corner Hustlers during the time period of the late 2000s into the early 2012?
Yes, sir.
Is that the time period we're talking about?
Yes, sir.
Let's get back to Sammy. You indicated Sammy was a Four Corner Hustler?
Yes, sir.
Correct? Did Sammy associate with anyone when you saw Sammy?
LaBar Span.
He reported to LaBar Span?
Yes, sir.
Was he with LaBar Span often?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But you said he was older than you?
Yes, sir.
Now let's go back to this transaction in 2012 where you gave Mr. Span, you said you gave him how much?
10 grams of heroin.
Did Mr. Span call you over the phone?
Yes, sir.
And did he ask to meet somewhere in 2012?
Yes, sir.
And where did you agree to meet? I think you indicated it was a car wash.
Yes, sir. Kilpatrick in Washington.
And who was on the phone when you and Mr. Span were talking?
Me and him.
No one else?
No, sir.
Did you eventually go to that car wash?
Yes, sir.
Did you go by yourself?
Yes, sir.
When you got to that car wash, was Mr. Span there?
No, sir.
Did Mr. Span eventually arrive?
Yes, sir.
Was Sammy, who is in Government's Exhibit 100, was he with Mr. Span?
Yes, in the gray Jeep. Yes, sir.
And did Mr. Span ask you anything about Sammy?
He asked me did I remember him.
And what did you say if you remember?
I said not really, but they was just explaining, 'cause he had been incarcerated for a while, but they were just telling me who he was and who brother he was. I knew his little brother Lawrence.
And you're talking about Sammy?
That's right.
Mr. Span was telling you who Sammy was, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you gave Mr. Span at that point the 10 grams of heroin?
Yes, sir.
And that was worth approximately $800, correct?
Yes, sir.
Was that the only time you recall giving Mr. Span narcotics, as opposed to cash during that time period he was asking you between 2010 and 2012?
Yes, sir.
Now, during this time period, at the time you're describing that, your encounters with Mr. Span during this time period, you were also selling drugs, correct?
Yes, sir.
Did you particularly carry a firearm during that time period?
No, sir.
Did you associate with people who carried firearms?
No, not, I don't think so.
Did you know if Mr. Span and the people he associated with carried firearms?
Yes, that's what he do.
What did Mr. Span do between 2010 and 2012?
Had people hurt.
What do you mean by that?
Killed, shot, robbed.
Is that one of the reasons why you were paying him when he would call?
Yes, sir.
Because you did not want that to happen to you? Exactly. I'd like to take you to the summer, late spring or early summer of 2012. Do you recall an incident with Mr. Span that occurred at a car wash? I think the same car wash you're describing at Washington and Kilpatrick? Yes, sir. Do you remember the name of that car wash? Lehman's Car Wash. Judge, may I have the ELMO, please? I'm going to show you Government's Exhibit 443. Do you recognize that exhibit? Yes, sir. What is that exhibit of? The car wash. That's the one at Washington and Kilpatrick? Yes, sir. Is that how it looked back in 2012? Yes, sir. Judge, I believe this. I don't have my exhibit list in front. I don't think it's admitted. Is there any objection to it? No, Judge. All right, 443 is admitted. Thank you, sir. Now, the car wash, there was a small restaurant next to it, correct? Yes, sir. And did the restaurant have a small patio? Yes, sir. Do you recall being at the car wash in the incident we're about to talk about that occurred in the spring or early summer of 2012? Yes, sir. And who was with you at that time? At the car wash, it was just, well, people was just up there. Wasn't with me, but it was a few people. It was Cap, the guy named Tristan. There was a few people up there. P.O. and the people that work in the car wash, the actual workers. I'm going to show you what's been marked as Government's Exhibit 126. Do you recognize the individual in that photograph? Yes, sir. Who's that? That's P.O. Do you know what his real name is, or do you just know him as P.O.? Just know him as P.O. And was P.O. part of a gang? Not that I know of. And how did you know P.O.? From the car wash. P.O. was always up at the car wash? Yes, sir. Just hanging out? Yes, sir. And he was hanging out this day in 2012? Yes, sir. You said there was someone named Cap? Yes, sir. I'm showing you Government's Exhibit 144. Yes, sir. Do you recognize the individual in that photograph? Yes, sir. Who's that? That's Cap. Was Cap a member of a gang? I don't know. How did you know Cap? From the nightclubs and coming to the car wash. He was just a guy from the west side. And he was up there that day too? Yes, sir. Do you recognize the individual in this photograph? Yes, sir. Judge, I didn't say it. Who Mr. Fountain just identified Cap. That was Government's Exhibit 144, if I didn't say that for the record. Now showing Government's No. Judge, I don't believe this was shown before. Government's Exhibit 134. There's no objection from defense counsel. It's already in evidence. Sorry, should have my list up with me. Do you recognize the individual in this photograph? Yes, sir. Who is that individual? Dollar. And who is Dollar? A guy that be at the car wash. Another guy at the car wash? Yes, sir. You'd see him regularly? Yes, sir. So are these three of the people that were at the car wash that day about the incident we're about to talk about? Yes, sir. And the incident we are about to talk about, as I described before, was an incident with Mr. Span. So you're with but these three individuals you just identified and yourself were up at the Lehman's car wash, and did Mr. Span eventually come up to the car wash?
Yes, sir.
How did Mr. Span get there, if you know?
He pulled up in a minivan.
Who was driving?
He's always driving. Him.
Do you remember the color of the minivan?
Gold.
Was anyone else with him?
Yeah, Shorty.
Did Mr. Span do anything when he pulled up?
I didn't notice. I just heard some people loud talking, and when I looked up, I seen him talking to one of the car wash workers, asking him where P.O. at.
Mr. Span was asking where P.O. was?
Yes, sir.
And what happened next?
P.O. was up there, but P.O. was hiding inside of a pop machine, and we hearing LeBar Span telling him if he don't pay him or get up with him, what he's going to do to him.
Okay, so you're at Lehman's. Mr. Span pulls up and he's yelling for P.O.?
Yes, sir.
And you said P.O. is actually hiding?
Yeah, and the car wash guy told him he don't know P.O., so he told him he wasn't there, and he just got to hollering telling people, because he knew other people was in the back, so people could hear him. He got to hollering saying what he was going to do to P.O. if P.O. didn't bring him some money.
And you could see, or you knew that P.O. was hiding behind a pop machine?
Yes, sir.
Because you were just up there with P.O. a few minutes before, right? Or was P.O. with you a few minutes before, right?
I was on the side of P.O.
Okay, so when Mr. Span pulls up, does P.O. dart out of there?
No, the angle he pulled up on, he couldn't see P.O., and P.O. just stayed on the side of the pop machine while he did his little rant.
Who did a rant?
LeBar.
And LeBar's rant was, "Where's P.O.? I need money from him."
Yeah, he's saying he was going to drop me off some money or bring me something. He ain't did it. Tell him when I see him, he'd know what it is.
And when you're saying that, you're saying Mr. Span was talking about P.O., that P.O. was supposed to drop off something?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you heard Mr. Span say this?
Yes, sir.
Now, were you supposed to see P.O. again later that evening?
Yes, sir.
Why?
We was going to Hush nightclub.
You were going where?
We was going out.
To a club?
Yes, sir.
A club on the west side?
Downtown, yes, sir.
Did you eventually see P.O.?
Something had happened with his house where he couldn't come to the party till late. He came probably like an hour before the party was over. Yes, sir.
And you learned something happened to his house?
Yes, sir.
When you say his, you mean P.O.'s house?
Yes, his girl's house. Yes, sir.
Let me take you to... We're still in 2012, November of 2012. You remember that time?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember being involved in a shooting that occurred in an area of Chicago called Greektown?
Yes, sir.
Where was Greektown, number 1, if you know?
On Jackson and Halstead.
Is that somewhere between downtown and the west side of Chicago?
Yes, sir.
And in or around November 2012, were you still paying Mr. Span regularly, or did you...
I stopped.
You stopped paying him?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Span?
Yes, sir.
And did you change your phone number at all?
Yes, sir.
Did you go to any steps to try to avoid Mr. Span?
Yeah, I wouldn't like go to normal spots he'd be at or he'd be patrolling. I wouldn't go through there with like my cars, but yeah.
And in November 2012 near Greektown, were you shot?
Yes, sir.
Where were you when this occurred exactly?
Leaving out of the restaurant.
What restaurant?
It was called Greek's.
And where was that at?
On Jackson and Halstead.
What time of day was it?
Around 2 o'clock in the morning.
What time?
About 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
This was on or about November 18, 2012?
Yes, sir.
Who, if anyone, was with you at that time?
My friend Hood, Tristan.
Did either of them have nicknames?
Hood, yes, sir.
What was Hood's nickname?
That's it, Hood.
Was there another individual named Vez with you?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, Vez. He had went to the party with me.
So, but I'm not asking you about a party. I'm asking on November 18, 2012, when you were walking out of a restaurant in Greektown at... Where was that again?
Jackson and Halstead.
So who was with you at that time?
Tristan, Hood, and Vez.
And you indicated you were shot at that location?
Yeah.
And anyone else of those people shot?
Yes, sir.
Who?
Vez and another one of my friends, but he wasn't with me that day. He's deceased now.
So after the shooting, or at the shooting, at this time in November 2012, approximately when was the last time you had paid Mr. Spann, do you think, prior to that?
Probably about 3 to 4 months.
Would it have been right around July of 2012?
Yes, sir.
Let me take you into 2013 now, January of 2013. Earlier, when you introduced yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you talked about that conviction and that sentence you received in case 10 CR 05797. Remember that?
Yes, sir.
And you told us that that sentence was vacated, correct?
Yes, sir.
Before I go there, one other point on the Greektown shooting. You were not able to see who shot you in November of 2012, is that correct?
No, sir.
Okay, just to clear that up.
No, sir.